Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a timing chain on a 2015 GMC Terrain. This is the 2.4. Now this is the exact same job on any Equinox or Terrain 2010 to 2017. It's also very similar on like Buick Verano or something, anything with the 2.4. I think Malibu's had them as well. This one runs just fine, no check engine lights, although it does make some kind of funny noises, so I'd be willing to bet maybe we do find a guide or something that's broken in there. But I'm selling this car, and rather than selling it and having a new owner worry about it, it's more or less routine maintenance on these to just do a timing chain. Because if I do the timing chain now while it's running, it's relatively cheap. I think the parts are less than $200. If you wait until after it breaks or stretches and skips time, now you're talking a few $1,000 job because you end up having to pull the heads off, send them out, and rebuild the top half of the engine. So we don't want to do all that. So we're just going to throw a timing chain in now before the problems actually happen and get it done. So let's jump into it. We also have a couple other little things to do at the end, and we'll take care of those as well, just to make it ready to sell. So let's get started on our timing chain. So this does have 116,000 miles on it. It doesn't burn any oil at all. It's had regular oil changes, but I'd be willing to bet there's still something broken there. So let's get it apart. We'll get started by removing this gratuitous use of plastic on top of our engine here. It's the air intake. It's actually a resonator, so you don't hear all the air rushing into the engine as it tries to develop its massive 180 horsepower. So we'll just loosen up the clamps on the throttle body and the airbox and slide it out of there. There's also a little breather tube that unclips from the side. We can pull our oil cap off of here and pull out this other piece of plastic that really doesn't need to be there, but it makes it look pretty. Put our cap back on before stuff ends up in our engine, and we can unbolt our airbox. 2 bolts in the back, unplug our mass airflow sensor, and slide the airbox out of there. And now it's time for Confessions with Scott. And today's confession is, every once in a while, I do have to temporarily give up my man card. You know, times where I'm wearing gloves or reading the directions. And for this job, I want to read the directions, because if I get it wrong, it gets very expensive. I just want to use the directions as kind of a guide so that I know I'm doing everything the way it's supposed to be done. So where do you get these directions? Well, you can, if you have an extra arm and a leg that you want to give up, you can get a monthly subscription to services like No Data and Michelle. You can figure out who those really are, and they will give you a guide to put this all back together. If you're somebody that doesn't want to give up an arm and a leg, or you're just working on one car here and there, it's not worth the monthly subscription, I did learn of a new service that will help you out. And that service is eManual Online, where you can buy just the manual that you need for the job you're working on right now. No monthly subscriptions, you just buy what you need when you need it. Now, just because it isn't an expensive subscription-based service doesn't mean that you don't get the same high quality or even higher quality manuals that you would get from the other services. As a matter of fact, a lot of the manuals that eManual uses are actually the dealer service manuals that your dealer techs would be using when they're putting your car back together. It tells you everything you need to know about your vehicle and some things you don't, like those torque specs I've heard so much about. So let's take a look at the one for our car and see what it has to offer. So here's our manual for our Terrain. It just so happens that it looks just like our Terrain minus the wheels. It doesn't always work out that way. Here's everything we need to know for our timing. Go through all that. It also has pretty much everything else you need to know about your vehicle. Wiring diagrams. Also has ground locations, component locations, harness numbers, sub-harness numbers, everything the factory uses, code descriptions, diagnostic flow charts, and my absolute favorite, body panel replacement. If you want to put the inner rocker panel on. Oh, look at that. Number 7, plug weld accordingly. For all the experts that told me you can't plug weld new cars. It appears GM thinks you can. A-pillar replacement. Shows you putting the backings in. How to put the backings in. And we've done this job before. Put some frame rails in. For everyone that said I could have straightened them. Nope, they're not repairable. It's complete replacement, unless just the end of it is bent.
And there's actually a repair procedure for that. It's right here. There's that little mark on the frame rail. Tells you how to line it up and how to replace just the end if it gets hit up here and just crinkles up this little part. That part's replaceable. Everything else is not. If it's damaged back here, you got to replace it. And this lets you know the right way to do it so you don't end up being called that somebody that's been there before. So if you need a manual for your car, just head on over to eManual here. They have all kinds of stuff. Cars, agricultural, business and industrial. If there's something that exists and there's a manual for it, they probably have it. Electronic games, power sports, if you break your toys. This will be my next one, since we'll be working on the G8. And as a bonus, this manual even comes with an owner's manual, and since I don't have one, that is definitely a bonus, in case I want to read up on my vehicle, which is highly unlikely, but the option is there.
Once you purchase your manual, you can view it online anytime you want, or you can download it to your device and you can have it forever. It's yours to keep until you lose that device. Or if you're really old school or just hate trees, you can go ahead and print it out, which is what I did. Not because I hate trees, but I am old school. Just because I get my greasy paw prints all over it, when I'm done, I can just throw the papers away. If I'm viewing it on a laptop and I get it all greasy, it gets expensive when I throw those away. So I just print everything out, works for me. Do what works for you. So if you want to use this service, there's a link in the description that will take you to their site. And if you use code VCOR22, you can actually get 22% off any purchases site-wide. If you don't want to go to the description to find it, it's the first pinned comment. Sorry, haters. No pin of shame this week. I got it. So, back to our timing chains.
Now it's time to start opening up the engine. I'm going to pull the valve cover off, pull all the bolts out of it, pull all the bolts out of the coils. Pop all of our coils out of there. Just going to leave them plugged in and set them off to the side. And plug our cam actuators. Just a couple bolts back here. Pop the wiring harness out. And a couple more bolts. Pull the evap line off. And we'll pull the fuel line off this little hanger here. Just going to bend the tab back and slide the plastic piece off of it. One more bolt in there and we can pry our valve cover off. Likes it on there. And we're going to move this evap line over very carefully. If we bend it too much, we'll have a two-piece line and we don't want that. Sneak the valve cover out from under the wiring harness. And grab our gasket off of here. At least part of it. And grab the rest of it. Now we can head inside the wheel well, pull this little splash shield down, just a couple push pins in it. Pop the centers out and pop them off of there. And then we can see our belt, release the tension. And we can slide our belt off of there. We can pull our belt tensioner out of here. We conveniently placed a hole in the frame rail, so we can just put an extension right through there and get to it, instead of trying to use a wrench. Now we got to try and figure out how to get it out of there. It goes over the compressor and through the woods.
I win.
Now we can unbolt the crankshaft pulley. Pull the crankshaft pulley off with our special puller. Just a little wiggle and pull. We're going to move this ABS wire before we end up breaking it. Just tuck it up out of our way. We can start unbolting the timing cover. Can't get the impact into these top bolts, so we'll do those with the ratchet. And we can't even get that ratchet in there, so we're going to have to do this the caveman method. Get these last couple. Once you break them loose, they generally come out with your fingertips. And this is the part where we normally pry out on the cover a little bit and it pops right out. Unfortunately, that went out the window about, I don't know, 6 winters ago with all the salt. So it's a little corroded on there. We don't want to continue to just pry on it, because if we keep prying on it, the pins that are frozen into the cover are going to end up breaking the little ears off where they're in the cover. So we're going to have to rethink our strategy here. Try prying a little bit more in a different spot. Still not working. We're going to use a pick to scrape out all the rust and corrosion and salt and whatever else is in that little dowel pin hole, so we can get some penetrating oil in there. That hole goes all the way through the cover, so we are able to get to that pin. Give it a little tap, 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 roo, awkwardly with a hammer, because we can't actually take a real swing at it. So we're just going to tap it and ask it nicely to come loose. Let's see if that worked. We'll put our pry bar back on the bottom, and we'll try another pry bar up here and see if we can get it with the double pry bar method. And we did manage to break it loose. There's still another dowel pin in the front. We got enough play that we should be able to get that one off of there. And it's free, kind of. The gasket's still stuck to the back, but since we haven't taken the engine mount out, the gasket can't come out yet because it goes around the engine mount. So we're just going to take the cover off by peeling the gasket off of it. And slip our cover down here. Now we're going to pull our plugs out. We need to take the first one out to verify we're at top dead center. But I'm going to take all of them out because it just makes turning the engine over a little bit easier. And they're not that hard to take out. See how easy that was? And now we can take our engine mount out of here. So we'll unbolt it from the frame rail first, and it'll just sit there. And we can pull our mount off of the engine, and then it'll drop down. We do have a block of wood underneath there, and a pry bar. So I step on the pry bar to lift the engine up a little bit to squeeze our mount out of there. And now we have to loosen up the bracket that mount bolts to. That bracket has to come out of there. That's what's keeping our gasket in. Got our mount out of there. And now we can get our gasket out of here.
So it's not that there's not a lot of room to work in here, because for a newer car there actually is. However, with me in the way, it's really hard to videotape everything I'm doing. You're not really going to see a whole lot. You're going to see my hands in the way instead of actually what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart a core engine that Scott's GM Emporium has donated to us, and we're going to do it on the floor without this whole pesky car in the way, so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish this job, and I'll make sure that I record everything that I did to show you all the new parts in there, because I know we have trust issues and I don't want the internet accusing me of just not doing the job. So that's what we're going to do, and then I'll show you how to put it all back together, and hopefully that gives you a better idea of what I'm actually doing in here when, you know, this is all you see. So let's go take our other engine apart and do our timing chains on that one. So we have our donated engine from Scott's Terrain Emporium. Now, this thing was pretty new when I got it. I think it came out of 2012, and I probably got it in 2012, early 2013, and it's been sitting in the corner ever since. I didn't want to sell it because the truck was hitting the front end and it was burned, and the interior and everything from the doors forward was burned. That's what all this melted stuff is. So I had no way of knowing how many miles were on it, how good it was. And on top of the front end being burned, the tires were flat, and they must have drug it from the back end because they wore the wheels down to almost nothing, and the subframe had a bunch of scrapes on it, and the oil pan's got a hole in the bottom of it, probably from dragging it out of wherever they drug it from. So I wasn't going to sell it because I couldn't verify the mileage or if it ran or anything like that. So it was basically just a core sitting in the corner waiting for me to take it apart and send it to the scrapyard. Well, now I have a really good reason to take it apart, so we're going to show you how to do the timing chains right out here in the open without that pesky car around it, and maybe take a look at it and see if maybe I should have put an oil pan on it and sold it. Or if it just belongs in the scrapyard where it's actually going now.
So we have to do a little extra work here because we need to tear it down to the point we were on the other engine. So we'll pull our valve cover off of here. And what's left of our coils are a little crispy. And they're also marinating in rusty water. I have one of those special 10mm bolts with the rounded off edges. 10mm circle. So we'll use our turbo socket. Take that off of there. Those things are great, especially up here in the Rust Belt where we have lots of round-headed bolts. We'll pull our high-performance dual coil assembly out of here. And we can pry our valve cover off of here. If we can get it over our cam actuator solenoids. It's supposed to slide right over, but we're going to melt it. We pull our spark plugs out with an impact just to upset the internet. A little bit of water in there. That's okay. It'll just go down in the cylinder where it belongs. We don't need to clean it out of there. We're going to pull them all out on the off chance we can spin this motor over. Pull our crankshaft pulley bolt out. And pull the bolts out of our engine mount bracket. Our tensioner off. Pull our crank pulley off. And we can start unbolting our timing chain cover. We can pull our little cover off of our timing chain cover. Not that we need to do it, but it's going in a separate pile, so I need to take it off. And we can pry our cover off of here. This one wasn't frozen on like the other one, so we don't need any special measures to get it off of there. We didn't break it, so I'll save it because I'll use it for the next one that I do break. The chains don't look too bad. A little slack in this one. So now the important part, why I print out the directions. We need to follow the steps in order here. So we're going to pull out this upper guide. This one's not exactly good since part of it is melted to the timing chain. That's not something you normally see. We'll pull out our tensioner. Just unbolts from the back of the head. We'll reset it later. Now I can pull our cam sprocket off, the exhaust cam. Just unbolt the center of it. Wiggle it off of the cam and then slip it underneath the chain. Set the chain off to the side. And bolt this guide. Fish it out through the top. Doesn't look like it's got too much wear on it. We can unscrew this little plug. And behind it is another bolt so we can get this guide out. We can unbolt our spacely sprocket from the front, which is our intake cam. And now we can get our chain out of here. Move it around the crank. So before we went and pulled off the timing chain, I would have rotated this engine to where our timing mark lined up down below, and the keyway was at the top. Unfortunately, it's locked up tight as a drum, so we're going to have to pretend. We're going to put that keyway up at the top and line up our little timing mark. And I think I've come up with a solution so that we can rotate our cams to get those marks lined up. A couple different color links on our chain here. One right there. And one right there. And there should be one more. 2 oranges and a blue. And the other one is probably underneath all this melted plastic. So we'll be able to line everything up, but the engine's not going to run. It doesn't matter. It's not going to run anyway. So we're going to pull our cam off of here. This is work that we normally wouldn't be doing to do a timing chain. I just want to take the rocker arms out of there. That way I can rotate the cams anywhere I want, and it's not going to open the valves. I don't have to worry about them hitting the piston. So we're just going to do this so that we can rotate our cams and get all of our marks lined up, just so you can see what I'm doing. Like I said, if we had rotated this back to where the timing marks were lined up before we took the chain off, it'd be the same thing. We'll put our cam back in. Just put a couple caps on it. Make sure you tighten that down to manufacturer specs. Now we can pull the intake cam out. That little block on the back side is actually the high pressure fuel pump drive. So I cap is kind of frozen on there. We'll just lift it up enough to sneak these rocker arms out of there. And bolt it back down. Manufacturer specs, of course. There's some flats on the cam, so we can just put a wrench on it, turn the cam anywhere we want it to go, especially since it's not actually doing anything now. There's two different settings for these, depending on which engine you have. You have to look up your RPO codes, and that'll determine where the little notches sit. So we're going to align it for the first style and see how that works for us. We can't check the RPO codes because those are in a glove box, which is a melted pile of plastic that's been in the garbage dump for quite a few years now. Now we're going to pull out our tensioner. This is for the balance shaft chain. It drives 2 balance shafts, and it also drives the water pump. So first you take the tensioner out. Then you take this front guide out. Not a lot of wear there. Take the upper guide out. And we'll take the tensioner guide out. Now we can slip our chain off of our spaceless sprockets. And then rotate all of our timing marks so that everything's aligned. So I marked everything just to make it a little bit easier to see. Even mark the chain. Line up the intake balance shaft first, and the exhaust balance shaft. Put it up and around the water pump sprocket. Doesn't really matter where that goes. There's no timing marks on there. And then we'll line up our mark on our crank. Put our front guide back in here. There are 3 different color marks on this one as well. Put our upper guide back in. Put our tensioner guide in. Now we have to reset our tensioner. This one's pretty easy. Just put it in a vise or use a big pair of pliers. Push it back in and stick I have a tiny little Allen wrench that fits in there. Knew I bought that set for some reason. I'm never going to use it for actually taking out an Allen screw that small. We'll set our tensioner in here, bolt it in. Once it's bolted in and we verify all of our marks are lined up, we can pull the pin on our little tensioner grenade and everything should be lined up. Should have no slack in the chain. Whenever I'm changing the timing chain, I always go ahead and change this chain as well. Since you're there, it's not that expensive, might as well get it done. Chances are it's probably stretched out too. And on our original Terrain, a failed tensioner for that chain is actually what was making our noise. And of course, I guessed wrong. We had the other RPO code, so I had to rotate the intake cam down to where it belongs for this style of engine. Otherwise, our timing marks will never line up. So we drop our chain in there with our sprocket and lock it into the cam and bolt it on. Now when you're putting new chains on, I put all new sprockets on as well, all new guides, everything. Drop our tensioner guide in there from the top. Bolt it in. Put our rear sprocket on our cam for the exhaust valves. Lock it in there and tighten it up. Put our front guide in. And we'll put our upper guide in. We'll pretend it still has its nylon on it and it isn't melted all over the chain. You get a new one when you get the kit anyway. Now we need to reset our tensioner. In order to do that, we have to pull this little clip out of here. Slide the center of it out. And we'll put it in the vise and we'll use our special OEM tool. They actually do make a tool for this, but a screwdriver works just fine. And just rotate it down and twist it at the same time and it'll lock on its tab. And once it's locked in, it becomes a live mine. If you drop it, it goes off. And good luck finding all the little parts. Put the little collar back on it. And slide the tensioner back in the housing. Make sure it's all the way in there. And we put our snap ring back in. Once our snap ring's in, we're out of danger. It's not going to go launching across the driveway. There we go. It's reset and ready to go in. So we just screw it back in here. Tighten it up. To re-engage the tensioner, just take a screwdriver, push back on the guide, push it in about 1/4 of an inch and it'll release, and it's ready to go. Chain should be where it belongs. All of our marks are lined up, and our timing chain job is mostly complete. It's really not that difficult. Don't forget to change your little oiler there. We do get full of debris and stop oiling the chain. That just leads to problems. Now we're back to prove to the internet experts that I actually did the timing chains on our original engine. You can see our new chain with the different color links because it's not all faded and has melted plastic on it. All of our marks are lined up. We got new tensioners, new guides, new oilers, and new chains. And a couple new sprockets in there. And new guides up there as well. If you really want to open a can of worms, you can also change the water pump while you're in here, but I decided to stop where I was.
So that's it. All of our timing chains are replaced. Well, these original ones are put back in, but they would have all been new. All our marks would have been there. We would have had some plastic on this guide. It wouldn't have been melted. Basically, it looked like the one that we just did. So all we need to do now is put our cover back on here, our little cap in there, and our valve cover on.
Oh yeah, and we might want to put the spark plugs on. But I'm going to do it all in this engine because that other engine, that's going in the scrap pile. It was just there for show. We'll use the electric ratchet to put the spark plugs in. I know the internet experts love that. And now we can throw our valve cover on there. We got a new gasket on it. Slide it underneath the wiring harness, and all of our lines. Hopefully we don't get any trapped inside, but no guarantees. Climb up on our milk crate because it's short to reach in here. At least all the way in the back. There we go. And now we can start bolting it down. And of course, you know, I didn't clean the valve cover before I put it back on. But that's okay because there's another plastic cover to cover that dirt so we don't have to clean it. Nobody will ever know. We can drop our coils in here. And bolt those down. Plug in our cam actuator solenoids, our wiring harness, and we can reconnect our evap line, our purge line, that I managed not to break, amazingly. Now we need to change the front seal on our timing chain cover. So we just pop it out of there. And we got our new seal. Set it in there. Tap it in to get it started. And we'll get a special seal installer. Tap it in evenly all the way around till it bottoms out. And there's the old timing chain sitting on the wheel in case you didn't believe that I did change those. We can put our timing cover gasket in here. Slip it over the dowel pins. And then we can put our timing cover up here. Did clean out the holes where the dowel pins go a little bit. Hopefully it slides on there if I cleaned it out enough. Guess not. I don't feel like taking it back out of there, so we're just going to tap it in here. Leave it for the next guy. Let him struggle. Of course, you know that guy's probably going to be me, but whatever. Start all of our bolts. And then tighten them all up. Now we can put our engine mount bracket back in here. Once it goes around that timing cover gasket. And then we can slide our engine mount in here. We'll bolt it to that bracket first. And tighten it down. It's sitting on a block of wood. Now we're going to pry our block of wood out of there. Put our pry bar underneath the oil pan. And slide our block of wood out of there. Probably should use a slightly smaller block of wood. Would make this job a little easier, but this is all I had at the time. There we go. Now we can get to that last bolt. Now that the engine's a little bit lower. We'll oil up our seal. Make sure we get our crankshaft pulley in the right way. And slide it in there. We have to get it to slide into the oil pump. And just a little tap to get it lined up. Put our bolt back in it. And tighten it down to 14 ugga-duggas. Those are electric ugga-duggas. Put our ABS wire back in here. Drop our tensioner in. A little easier to drop it in from the top. We'll just get it started, and then we can tighten it up through our frame rail hole, which is what we're going to do right now. Bolt our engine mount back down. Somewhere along the line, we actually put our belt back on as well. Now we can put the splash shield back up. Push pins back in it. Now we're ready to put our cover back over our valve cover. Hide the fact that we never bothered to clean it. We didn't clean this piece either, but the detailing gnome will get it when he cleans the engine. Drop our air box back in here. Slides to the front through the radiator support. Just 2 bolts in the back. Plug in our mass airflow sensor. And now we can put in our big waste of plastic. Put it down on the throttle body. Get that lined up. Flip it into our air box. Make sure it's in all the way. Plug in our breather tube. And make sure it's sitting on its little rubber mounts in the back. Now we can tighten up all of our clamps. Got one on the air box. Click. And one on the throttle body. It'll make it easy to find down there. Now we can go ahead and change the oil. Anytime I've had the engine opened up, I always like to change the oil. Not to mention, it was due for an oil change. I timed it that way so that I'd be doing these chains when I had to do an oil change anyway. Not wasting any oil. It's pretty dark, and it was definitely due. Our oil's drained, we'll put our oil plug back in here. Tighten it down to 6,000 foot-pounds. And clean up our mess. I always clean the parts when I put things back together. You know me. We'll spread out some of this rust proofing all over the frame. And we'll go ahead and change our oil filter. They tucked way down here. Get out of there. Change our gasket on our cap. Toss that in a pile. Put our new one on. I have to do this on camera or I'm going to get accused of using the old gasket. Flip our new filter in. I do feel the need to tell you that is a Fram filter. It's not orange, but it is a Fram, just to upset the experts of the internet. We'll tighten our cap down. Click. And we'll fill it back up with oil. Look at that, I do have a funnel. I just hate using them because then they get dirty. Now we have to go clean our funnel. Cap back on.
So we got a little fishbowl going on in our taillight here. One of those mailboxes jumped out and bit it. So we're gonna replace the light.
Just pop the little caps off. There's a notch in the bottom to stick the screwdriver in. And pry them up. There's a couple of 10mm bolts in there. And it should slide right out of the quarter panel. Note I said should.
Need a taillight removal tool. You want to be careful when using this, because if you put too much pressure on it, you can scratch the lens. In the pile.
We have our new light from Scott's Terrain Emporium, proud sponsor of our video. Plug it in, slide it back into the quarter panel. Make sure we don't get that quarter window trim stuck underneath it. The factory does a lot of times. Taillight installation tool to clip it in there. Put the bolts back in, and put our cap back on. We'll check it later. I'm sure it works.
I've driven around for a little bit just to make sure that there's no issues with our timing work that we did. No check engine lights, no noises like that. Everything's good. I also decided to see if I could collect all of the salt that they had put down. And I'm short a few thousand tons, but I did get quite a bit. So now we're gonna go ahead and since everything is good with our timing, we're gonna do our brake job the fast way. So let's get that done.
I'm sorry, the brake job hammer is still out of stock in my Amazon store. I don't know when it's going to be available.
So our brake job is all done, but before we can take it for a ride, we have a tire sensor that died. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to make this work on tire sensors, so we're gonna have to do it the hard way. So let's change that, throw our tires on, and take it for a ride.
So this is the last of the tire sensors on this car. I replaced them one by one as they died. So the new owner of this Terrain will have all new tire sensors. Some newer than others. So we need to take our tire all the way off. I did notice there was a little bit of corrosion on that wheel. Otherwise, if it was a nice clean wheel, I would just push the outside in and push it down and change the sensor that way. But we're going to take the whole tire off and clean up our rim so we don't have any leaks later on. Tire off the other side, and we can see all that corrosion. And now we can see it's all gone. So I did clean it up. We'll unbolt our old sensor, toss that in a pile, and then we'll rip our valve stem out of here. The hammer fulcrum on there so that we don't scratch the wheel, and put our new tire sensor in there. That's a different style sensor, but it'll work. Click, pinned it down to manufacturer specs, and put our tire back on. Hopefully not break the brand new sensor we just put in. fill up our tire. And unfortunately, the bead seated itself, so there'll be no pyrotechnics today to really annoy the safety experts of the internet. Sorry, guys. Now we can go ahead and reset all of our tire sensors, their locations, and reinitialize that new one we just put in. Super easy. Just go to the tire sensors, click yes, and it'll ask to relearn, and then we just need to actuate it. And if you don't know which tire you're supposed to be going to, the lights on the corner light up in the tire you're supposed to be initializing. I told you we were going to check this light later. And they're both working. So all of our tire sensors are reset. Make sure they're all reading on the dash. Hey, what about that one that's different? Alright, I'll fix it for you sticklers. 2 pounds is going to make a difference. I'll pull. There you go. You happy now? I know I can sleep at night.
So I'm all done with our little terrain here. I'm gonna hand it off to the detailing gnome and he can get it all cleaned up and it's ready to go to its new home. Let's tear this thing apart and get it ready for the scrapyard and see what it looks like inside. I think I made a good call. This is definitely a junk engine.
So we're gonna pull all of our timing chains back out. See if I can remember how this goes. Did just do it a couple minutes ago. You kind of have to go in order to get everything out of there, at least without a struggle. We'll pull our balance shafts out of there. And we'll pull the sprocket off of our water pump. In case you wondered what the balance shafts were, and this is what they look like. It's basically just some counterweights that rotate with the crankshaft. Keep the vibration to a minimum and hopefully let this engine last a little bit longer. Of course, it's probably going to blow up for other reasons. Pull our cams back off here. Toss that in the pile. Pull our housing off for our high pressure fuel pump. And pry it off of there. It's pretty corroded on there. There's some dowel pins in there. And that cam's not looking too good. It's a little rusty. We can unbolt our head. There's a couple inverted Torx bolts in the end, and then the rest of it just has normal head bolts. Wiggle and pulling our heads off of here. Timber. We'll pull our head gasket off. Stuck on there pretty good. I think we know why our engine's locked up. It was a submarine at one time. Probably just from sitting outside. Water got in the intake, sat on top of those pistons, and just rusted everything up till it wouldn't move. We'll pull our exhaust manifold out of here. It's going in a separate pile from the head. We'll pull all the valves out of the head later. You get more money if you strip it all down. And pull off our emissions pipe. This was actually a California emissions car. That's why it uses the different timing mark placement on the cams, and that's why it has this pipe on here. Pull the rest of our gasket off of here. We'll separate the trans from the engine. They like sit on there, they're friends, so we're going to have to break up that friendship. We'll slide the engine off of here. I did leave the torque converter bolted to the flex plate because there was no way I was going to get it apart. Because you can't rotate the engine, it'd be really hard to get to those bolts. Since they're going to the same place, they can stay together. We'll unbolt our oil pan, and you can see the inspection port in the bottom. And I'd like to take this opportunity to point out that Snap-on has incorrectly labeled our pry bar as not for use as a pry bar. So we're going to use it to pry our oil pan off of here. It doesn't look too bad in there. There's a little junk in the bottom. I've definitely seen worse. Pull all of our main caps off, which is actually the bottom half of the block. All of our bolts out. And we'll use that out of pry bar again. Pry the bottom half of this block up. It's stuck on its little dowel pins. Go ahead and unbolt all of our connecting rods. All of our caps off of there. And see what our bearings look like. We've got some junk that settled in there. Not too bad. No wear. A little rust from water sitting in there, but pull our crank out of here. And we'll try and push our pistons out. I don't know why I bothered. They were all pretty rusty in there. So we'll give them a little tap, help them out. There's one. There's another. Just gotta break that ridge of rust on there. We don't care if it takes the rings out. They're all going in the pile. And this is the one that was really stuck. It's gonna take a little more finesse to get this one out. Stay with me.
I win.
I have to get our oil filter cap back off of here. This is a good lesson for if you ever have one that the end of it breaks off or strips out. Just jam a screwdriver in the end of it and tap it around in a circle, and it will come out. If not, just peel it off of there. And try the go around part. If that doesn't work, and we just break it. So it's done spinning. Pretty porous from being melted, so they usually are a little stronger than this. Snap-on also claims that that is not a chisel. Clearly they are wrong again. Oil filter's out. Still got a little left of the cap. Just going to go in between the threads. Push it inside. And peel it out of there. We didn't even destroy anything other than the cap. It was no good anyway.
Well, there we go. It's ready for the scrapyard. Or maybe I could turn it into a coffee table. It'll go great in my basement next to the other half-finished coffee table I already have. Pizza girl will love that. Maybe this is turn it into a lamp, or maybe we just throw it away. So thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Maybe we'll take that transmission apart. Let me know if you guys want to see that.